Slept on Cinema is sponsored by Training Ties, the ultimate shoe tying tool. If you know someone who's struggling with shoe tying for any reason, Training Ties is the perfect solution.
This is one film that won't appeal to either sports or comedy fans.
Celtic Pride is a basketball comedy the way Fatal Attraction was a dating movie.
The worst concept, execution, and product ever.
This movie is more than a miss. It's an airball.
Hollywood's attempt to tarnish the greatness of the Celtics dynasty.
Celtic Pride dribbles away its comedic potential.
A complete waste of talented actors.
This is from Bill Murray, and as to why he turns down roles from Judd Apatow. The only Apatow movie I ever saw was Celtic Pride. It is just brutal. Totally brutal.
Welcome to this week's episode of Slept on Cinema. I'm your host, Stan Steamer.
And I'm GrobeStreet.
This week we're getting into the 1996 sports comedy classic, Celtic Pride. And this is a special episode for us. We are both big, huge Celtics fans, and figured after the Celtics won the championship, what better way to honor that than to review Celtic Pride, which is a movie that I think both of us hadn't seen in a long time. And it was better than I remembered.
I hadn't seen it in a long time because I thought from everyone talking that it's an awful movie. Every time it comes up, it just gets awful reviews, or who's ever seen it just talks poorly about it. So I was a little hesitant in watching it, but man, it's so much better than I thought. And maybe I don't think it's completely because we're still riding that Celtics championship high. I think it still is. It's just better than I remembered it being.
Yeah, I think it's one of these things that sort of got a bad rap early, and that just stuck. And Here we are, to our benefit. Fortunately, we get to review it. This movie, like all movies, is at or below 50% on Rotten Tomatoes for both critics and audiences. And we structured the podcast so that the first half is spoiler-free, talking about some things to look for in the film, take a break, go watch the movie, come back, and talk about what we just watched.
Rotten premise. Mike and Jimmy are disconsolate after watching their favorite team, the Boston Celtics, lose a game in the NBA Finals. They hatch a far-fetched scheme to sabotage Lewis Scott, the star of the opposing team, who is known for his love of nightlife, by getting him very drunk, and thus too hungover to perform in the next game. After the two inadvertently kidnap the player instead, they dither about whether or not to release their captive. Critics, 12%, audience, 32%.
That's low. This has got to be one of our lowest combined scores that we've done. Maybe even the lowest.
This is definitely a tough. I don't think we've been so low in the almost single digits for critics before. 12% is pretty low.
That's low.
Yeah.
It's shockingly low is what it is.
Yes. Quite. It's not, like we just said, looking back on it, watching this again, it's not as bad. I think there might have been some lofty expectations based on the cast of this for something better.
Yeah, but that could be it, because the cast is amazing.
It's so good. So maybe it was just a letdown thing, but yeah, well, pretty low, 12% critics and 32% audience.
Yeah, I do have a theory onto why it had poor reviews, but we can get to that later. Some interesting background. So this movie came out April 19th, 1996. This is probably our worst opening movie we've had maybe ever as well. It opened number 7. I don't recall having something that far down the list. I mean, it's probably even tough these days to open number 7. There just aren't as many movies released anymore. I don't even know if at any given weekend there's going to be 7 movies out, but open number 7. One interesting tidbit, it was behind both Primal Fear and Fear. So there were a lot of Fear movies out at the time. Primal Fear was number 1, Fear was 5. Yeah, and 2 other movies also opened ahead of it. So it had The Substitute came in at number 2, and Mrs. Winterborn, which I'm sure you've seen, came in at number 6. I've never heard of Mrs. Winterborn.
No, but I do love The Substitute.
The Substitute's good. Yes. Took in, and I couldn't find any budget information on the film, but it took in only $9.2 million worldwide, which is, I doubt they made money on this one.
Yeah. Is the budget listed?
I couldn't find the budget anywhere.
I think they tend to hide that when it's pretty low.
Yeah. Like no one wants to advertise how much money they lost on this. But again, I think this is better than its reputation and should have done better than 9.2. One interesting thing about the movie is it was written by Judd Apatow and Colin Quinn. And Judd Apatow is now, I don't know, a mega writer, director. He's huge. He had an unbelievable string in the 2000s. But this was only his second film as a writer. He did Heavyweights in 95. Then he did this movie in 96. And then it almost seems like this kind of put him out to pasture a bit. I think maybe because it just really didn't do well, he kind of shied away from real movie work. He had a little bit of uncredited script work in the 90s on some movies that I think were pretty good. The Cable Guy, Liar Liar, Bruce Almighty, Happy Gilmore, The Wedding Singer. So not only good movies, but movies with A+ actors in them. And then I think he kind of hit his stride a little bit. He did Freaks and Geeks in 1999, executive producer there, which only was the season. As time has gone by, that has grown in esteem in a lot of people's minds. I think that's now one of the more well-regarded network TV shows.
Were you a fan back in the day when it was on? Or have you seen
I didn't see it when it came on. I've seen it since, but at the time, I don't even know if I knew it was on.
That's a big hole in my knowledge. Is I've never seen any. I'm very aware that a lot of other people started there, but just time passed me by. I've never seen it. I just hear so many good things about that. But
yeah,
crazy.
It's an easy commitment again because it's only one season, and if nothing else, it's fun for like, oh, look at how young these people look.
Right. Yeah.
And then he didn't write another movie until 2005. So he really took a while after this film. His next movie was 40-Year-Old Virgin, which I think just set him off on his massive 2000s run where there was sort of the Judd Apatow formula for making a successful comedy. And he just rattled them off one after another. So I think this is obviously part of his growth. I think the writing in this is great. I think it's a great concept. But for whatever reason, this sort of put him on ice for a little while.
Yeah, he's we're in fantasy baseball together. I think he got a call up too soon. Doesn't mean he's bad. He just wasn't ready yet. A couple adjustments and crazy what a career. Because like now, there's not too many people where you're like, oh, this is a Judd Apatow movie. This is a Quentin Tarantino movie, whatever. Like when you hear Judd Apatow, you know exactly what you're going to get. He's one of the most. It's this guy's movie there is out there. Like, oh, this is Judd Apatow movie. That's why when going back to this movie, it's crazy to think that this is a Judd Apatow movie because every Judd Apatow movie is so known to be a Judd Apatow movie.
Yeah. This is getting in on the ground floor.
Colin Quinn, one of my favorite sneaky comedians. I don't know if you ever watched Tough Crowd back in the day. One of my favorite shows back on Comedy Central.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like he's like a forgotten man of comedy. He was like a man of comedy for a certain era that I feel like doesn't get his due.
No, doesn't. He's still out there. Follows his Instagram. He's still out there being hilarious. But I think I don't know I know he was somehow piped into like the Boston comedy scene, which comes up a little bit in this movie, which is pretty cool. So we do get some of that stuff from him being a comedian back in the day. And now too. I'm excited to get to some bolos if we want to start.
Yeah, let's do it.
So this resonates with me a little bit. I am a retired teacher of the same mastery as Daniel Stern here. I am a retired gym teacher. So I'm going to say the first thing I saw was a bad teacher.
I'm going to go with my first bolo with broken glass. This was peak broken glass backboard. Like there was nothing as good as in the 90s seeing someone with a dunk that broke the backboard. I don't know if like glass technology has really changed where this just doesn't happen anymore, but there was nothing better than just a rim rocking dunk that ripped down the whole thing.
I think it was the Shaq effect back in the day.
Oh, big time, yeah.
Shaq was fun, and then they had to get to the breakaway rims and all that stuff. But there was nothing cooler. I don't know, as a kid, you don't know the frequency of things as much, but watching a game, you're like, someone could just destroy the glass backboard today. And you just thought that could happen at any time. This is also true. Bolo, tons of keys on the gym teacher's hips.
Yes. And I'm going to go another profession here, but a profession-related item. Bolo, a plunger.
Bolo, the Boston gun.
Yes. And I'll follow this up with BOLO and after credits scene. Make sure you stay tuned for that.
I was curious. Sometimes I feel like you missed the end. I wasn't sure if you saw this, but yeah, at the end, awesome. Just because you did so unexpected.
It's so unexpected. It's well worth the wait.
Did you I thought that was awesome. I don't know why. Did you? It's just
it's great.
It's great. Okay, it's so crazy that was such a cool part of the movie, and it was after the credits. But BOLO smoking in a school.
It's the 90s.
The 90s, whatever.
I'll follow it up another smoking one. BOLO cloves. I feel like you don't see the clove cigarettes that much anymore, but BOLO the cloves.
I think it was because all the supposed cool kids were having cloves, and then everyone found out that those cool kids weren't cool, and then no one had cloves anymore.
Yeah. It's a shame.
BOLO 90s style saved documents.
BOLO a class ring.
BOLO would play on a famous 90s Charles Barkley commercial.
Commercials in general are just fantastic.
So good. So good.
BOLO a cell phone. Puts you right in the era.
BOLO superstitions.
Mm-hmm. A lot of those come up, obviously. Fandom. This is another thing that is really very 90s to me, but BOLO a grapefruit. I don't exactly know when this started or when this ended, but I feel like there was a period where everyone was eating grapefruit for breakfast. Like that was just you had people had the special little grapefruit spoon, and it was a whole
some
thing.
People put sugar on it. There was a little sugar pack they put on there, and then some people there was a period of time, I want to say in my maybe between age 9 and 11, where you'd see somebody with a grapefruit and they would cut it so perfectly where nothing would get stuck at all, and you could just spoon it in and get all of it. There was an artistry to dicing up and eating a grapefruit so you don't get all the the white stuff. But I think everyone had
I feel like that's
in the 90s.
Yeah, I think it's a forgotten skill. I think maybe we should try to bring it back. Maybe we should be a grapefruit pod.
No one talks about I would I think we should probably become a grapefruit pod. That's a good idea. BOLO concessions people walking around at an indoor event. I feel like that doesn't happen anymore. You got to go to the concession stands. Nobody's walking around.
That's right. I feel like now they've concentrated them only to the fancy seats where they're not walking around with whatever they're selling. They're walking around with exactly what you ordered.
Right.
I'll follow that up with just BOLO some great pub food.
Ugh, just pubs in general in this movie so good. BOLO Boston landmarks. Having moved out here, out to California and kind of missing Boston a little bit, it's crazy when you have your eye open for it. The 90s nostalgia that flies back from the Boston landmarks and the little Bostonian stuff that you see, just the signs in the garden from the 90s. We're like, oh, this is a fox sign from the 90s up in the garden.
I'll go BOLO heckling.
Oh yeah. Did you ever heckle when you went to games? Were you one of those? Did you have a friend that was good at it?
I am not a great heckler. I feel like I've dabbled very lightly, but I'm not the guy that everyone's entertained by who's a great heckler. But I do love being near a great heckler.
There almost is no better than being near a great heckler if you align with your interest. There are awful most hecklers are horrific and mean and awful.
Yep.
Little sidebar here. My buddy, one of the nicest person I know, my buddy Andy. We were at a Portland Sea Dogs game, and he had just gone. He's not a huge heckler, very, very. He's a special ed teacher. He's just the nicest guy in the world. But he loves his baseball, and he wants his team to win. He wanted Portland Sea Dogs to win. So he had just been in a trip to Nowheresville, Texas, and we were out in the right field bleachers at this random August Sea Dogs game, and he was going through the program and saw that the right fielder for the opposing team was from this no-name town in Texas. So he had just been to that town, and he started talking about the restaurants there and how this place uses too much floss, and I actually think this place is better, and just yelling it out. And you could feel the guy snickering and just dying laughing. And then in the middle of it, a ball was just cranked down the line, and he just biffed it. Like he just because he just off of laughing. And it was the first time like that drop was because my buddy was heckling him.
Oh, wow.
But in the best way possible. Like I hate when people are just horrific, like rude. I don't want to be there when someone's being mean, but if you can get the guy to laugh, like almost like he's in school, laughing at something he knows he shouldn't, that's the best.
Yep. Yeah, and I feel like for that, the minor league baseball game is the perfect venue for it as well.
Absolutely. That's probably puts it over the top because they can hear you.
It's like a nice low stakes venue. Like that guy didn't like cost himself like $10 million right there.
He breaks going to the dugout and be like, he brought up my hometown. Like, all right, it's all good. It's all good. No worries. They're actually going to take away your error. Don't worry. BOLO, slow motion footage, always big in these sports movies.
Love it.
Movies.
Yep. This is, I think, a relic of another time, but BOLO and 8-track.
Yes.
I don't know if we had that yet.
BOLO, a portable TV radio. One of the coolest things ever invented back in the day.
Yes, 100%. BOLO, a important toilet.
BOLO dunking in a toilet bowl.
And this is different from heckling. It's in the same family, maybe a cousin of heckling, but BOLO, just good trash talk.
Oh, so good. Yep. BOLO, gas prices. So good. Yeah.
It's one of those things that you probably never gets old to be like, whenever there's gas prices in a film, just oh my God, look at the gas prices. I feel like for me, it's gas prices and always the size of a newspaper.
Oh yeah.
Like newspapers used to be so wide.
This is a little side note. I failed to get you a goofy gift for Christmas. I was looking at like regular. I didn't know if they had like regular newspapers that come still oversized, like the 50s. I could not find any. All just like Etsy reprints of an old one, but not like getting the current New York Times. Like a
yeah, right.
I tried. Yeah, your turn.
I think that's it. I had some others, but I know we're gonna get into some of the cameos later, so I'm gonna save those for later.
Good point. I will put away my cameos and go with BOLO. I'll do a quick rundown. BOLO being allowed to linger after a game. That is not the case now. They push you out really fast. BOLO, Dan Aykroyd in disturbing clothing, which happens a lot in his movies. BOLO, basketball xenophobia, which has gotten a lot better in recent years. And BOLO, this was BOLO talking in the third person. People hated that in the 90s for athletes. And last one, BOLO, an interesting half-court shot form.
Yes, interesting, but successful.
Yeah, quite effective. I had a lot of fun with this next category, even though it's incredibly simple what I chose. I'm just curious what you think. This category is what drink to pair with the movie. What drink perfectly pairs with this movie for you?
So mine is very much a personal choice. It has some ties to the film, only in that it is green, which I think is very appropriate. But for me, it's also one of my favorite drinks. So I will pair this with almost any movie, but I think it pairs great here. It is the Gimlet, which is one of my favorite drinks to order. It's very simple. Just lime, gin, simple syrup. Classic drink, very refreshing. But why I think it pairs so perfectly with this is it is one of these drinks that you don't realize how potent it is. And you can find yourself well over imbibing much more than you intended to very quickly drinking these. So I think that clearly that happens to some characters here. And I think that I'm sure anyone who has had a Gimlet or 2 or 5 can attest to the being in that same situation. That for that reason, this is a perfect film to pair. And then also it's, of course, just one of the most delicious drinks out there. And to top it all off, it's green.
I'm glad that you use like a frequent drink and a high use drink for you, because I think that's kind of important for this movie. It's like, it's obviously not an everyman drink, but it is a frequent drink that you can have watching this movie, and that fits perfectly because you like it and it's tied personally to you. which I think this movie is, because we're kind of we're doing this movie because we're Boston Celtics fans and how we experience the game. And for me, I am now, I think this is my third or fourth year living outside of Boston. And my wife and I still have our season tickets to the Celtics. We cannot give those up. Don't know what it is. We're never moving back to Boston, but I can't give them up. It took me forever to get these tickets. I don't know what to do with them, but we still have them. And I have them partly because going to the games are so fun. And going to the games, the best part, you go in and you just it's like you see in this movie. You have your routine. And I can't pick this, but for 2 years of our tickets that we had, they had Sip of Sunshines at this little bar near us, like one small little part of the bar area.
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar.
Oh yeah, so you go in there and get your Sippo and sit there, and it's an oversized can. So that's a little hard to get for everyone, but I would just say your favorite beer or light dom or even those like liquor alcoholic seltzers, but get it oversized.
Hard seltzer?
Yeah, hard seltzer, but I don't know which ones, they Trulies or whichever one it is that they have at wherever, but at the Garden. Just get like an oversized 22-ounce big, like Bud Light, or just something you would get at a game. Whatever drink you would get at a game, it's perfect to watch this movie with. And we've done something similar in the past, but this movie is kind of like watching a sports game, and they show you that, they give you that feeling of walking into the venue and getting your drink and getting set up. And I feel like you can treat the movie the same exact way. So a Sam Adams, a Hazy, whatever, just oversized in a big can when you watch this movie.
Love it.
This movie's awesome. A lot better than I think we thought it was going to be. Excited for you guys to get on the other side so we can talk about it fully.
Yeah, enjoy.
The town, Boston. The team, the Celtics. The event, the NBA Finals. And their biggest fans are Jimmy and Mike.
You're in Beantown now, baby! Beantown!
They're loyal, dedicated, and faithful.
This is for my grandmother. This is for the state of Massachusetts, for Celtics, for Boston. Aw, man.
They have everything it takes to win the playoffs. Unfortunately,
He's gonna shoot it every time!
the Utah Jazz
I want him dead!
has Lewis Scott. Now,
He's thrown it in our face.
their mission is clear.
We went over there and, got him messed up, completely wrecked, so he was too hungover to play well on Sunday.
And for Lewis Scott, the real game is about to begin. Damon Wayans, Daniel Stern,
You're still my hero.
Thanks, Tommy.
Not you, Dad. I meant Lewis.
and Dan Aykroyd. Celtic Pride.
Slept on Cinema is brought to you by Training Ties, the ultimate shoe tying tool. If you know anyone who's struggling with shoe tying, Training Ties is the perfect solution. Or if you know anyone who just doesn't like tying their shoes, Training Ties keeps shoes tied all day long. Say no to Velcro and yes to independence with Training Ties.
Welcome back. That was awesome. I feel like we got it felt like we had two bonus scenes at the end. One at the end of the movie and then one at the end of the credits, which was just a fun little treat.
Yeah, that bonus scene, both bonus scenes were great for different reasons.
Yep.
Do we want to jib jab or do we want to get right into the draft?
Let's dive right into the draft.
Yeah. All right, let's go into the draft. Basketball movie. We're going to get right to the draft. All right, you have first overall, number one choice. What do you got?
First overall, I feel like I haven't gone this direction in a while. And I guess I'm not even sure. Is he the star? I guess up for debate, but I'm going with Damon Wayans. I thought he was amazing here.
I think I don't want to cut you off, but is he the star? We could probably wonder the same thing about who the main star is about the '08 Celtics that won. Like, is it Ray?
Mm-hmm.
Paul? Is it Kate? Doesn't matter. He's one of the big three of this movie.
I think that's right. I think they're all the stars.
Yes.
Is really the only way you could describe it. But I thought Damon Wayans, he was incredibly believable as an athlete, which is, I think, oftentimes tough and can sink a sports movie. Like there was never a point watching this where I was like taken out of the basketball scenes because of something he was doing in the court. That didn't happen once, which happens a lot in movies that aren't like, this is a comedy that's not driven by the sports, and he's a comedian, but I was never disappointed. Or his work on the basketball court I thought was like unbelievable. And also I feel like it's a short movie. It's obviously a comedy. It's funny, but I really got a sense of who this guy was. Like, I thought he actually developed the character really well in the short time that he had in the film. And I thought it was just great. I thought it was a great character. It was one of these roles that at the time in the mid 90s, I don't know who else really could have pulled this off. I think this would have been a challenging role for a lot of people. And I think he absolutely nailed it. And I don't get, because he actually had 3 movies in 1996. He had, obviously, this movie, Celtic Pride. He had Bulletproof and The Great White Hype, all of which qualify for our podcast, which is...
What? I love all 3 of those movies.
Every single one qualifies. This was the most poorly reviewed. And then he didn't do another movie for 3 years. I think maybe because none of these films did particularly well.
Oh, he didn't.
I think he just took some time off from movies. But, from watching this guy's a movie star.
Yeah. Wait, Bulletproof is the one with Adam Sandler, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And Great White Hype is a box movie with Samuel L. Jackson. That movie's incredible.
Jamie Foxx. I mean, yeah, these movies are great.
I wasn't sure that you were going to pick him because I didn't know that was my first overall pick, but I'm glad you did because I think you're 100% right. It's almost impossible, especially in basketball, to have an actor be believable on the court because it's just, the size difference just doesn't work. In general, I think it's so much better. That's why you have Ray Allen and he got Game and Shaq and Penny and Blue Chips. Like, it doesn't make sense. They look too small.
Yeah.
Basketball players.
Right. You need the athlete.
Yeah, you need the athlete. You can't be like an athletic guy because these are specimens that play in the NBA and they're tall. And it's funny because Damon Wayans would stand next to Dan Aykroyd and be about the same height because they're both like 6'1", 6'2", and Daniel Stern is 6'4", so he's like towering over him in some of the scenes. But you're like, well, he's a guard, so whatever. And it works and it shouldn't, and it's very impressive. Because that is the death of many basketball movies is having like Kevin Bacon in the era or something. Like, it just doesn't work.
Right. It takes you out of the movie, right? Like it just like cuts through what's going on in a way that can ruin a film. And that at no point did that happen here.
Yeah, he was so good. And he was so good in general in the 90s. 90s was a Wayans time, and he might have been the top of the Wayans in the 90s.
Yeah.
It's a great pick. This is definitely a sleeper pick, but I don't care. It's like a deep sleeper. I'm taking it number 1 because it made me laugh the 3 times that I saw. I kept forgetting about it when it happened. So there's a part where Damon Wayans sneezes in the face of his teammate who has a mask.
Yes.
With a mask on right away because that teammate is like backing up another teammate being like, oh, maybe you should have passed. And it's just so quick. He has the stupid mask on and they're making fun of the white player with like all the stuff, the elbow guards and the knee guards and everything else. Maybe he should wear an ear guard. And he had he's the bald guy with the classic mask, and Damon Wayans just sneezes in his face. So he has to wipe it off. I thought that was like I've never seen that before. I thought that was the funniest.
I've never seen an intentional sneeze like that in a film ever. That's a great pick because you're absolutely right. Incredibly funny. Like, it's one of these things that, you wonder how that, like, was that in the script? Did Damon Wayans come up with that? Because whatever the genesis of it was, it's perfectly timed. Everything about it is just right. It's
so quick. I give it credit to Damon Wayans because I feel like he just saw the guy and he's like, this guy needs his face sneezed in. Like, this is right. This is the. I don't care what Apatow wrote. I'm sneezing in his face.
I get that. I understand why that is might be considered a sleeper, but the execution at which that sneeze was done is first round execution.
I can't. I'm almost like I don't even understand myself and how much it tickles me that. My second pick, I'm taking their seats. My God,
great seats.
how do you not be a huge Celtics fan with those seats? Basically, was it front row? Basically front row, a couple like 4 rows behind courtside, and it's just like no wonder why these are massive fans. You know, they probably had this journey down from the nosebleed bleachers. They
worked their way up there.
Worked the way up there, and now the garden's going to be torn down, and they have these amazing seats. Their team's in the finals. I understand their level of passion with those seats at the Garden. So close where you get into the opposing player, the best player on the other team hears everything you say, and the coach is completely frustrated with you talking because you are so close. You can literally affect the game from those seats.
Yeah, it's a great pick. And it is one of those things if you have the great fortune to sit in seats like that, you never forget that. Like it's a totally different experience, and it's fantastic. It would make a fan out of anybody.
Have you ever sat courtside?
The closest I've sat to courtside is I have sat the first row behind the bench. So there were players in front of me. There was no fans in front of me, but it was not courtside.
Oh, wasn't that recently?
I've sat there a handful of times. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. All the cool seats. Yep. Yeah, that must be awesome. I went to when I was in my 20s. I was considering move out to LA. Didn't, but my buddy and I went to a Clippers game, and we had like the second to last row in the back. But Clippers game, no one was there, so we were second quarter. We spotted some seats and sat. wasn't courtside, but it was one row behind, and I had a hard time seeing what was going on because of Billy Crystal and his massive main fan in front of us that we ended up sitting behind.
That's awesome. And my second round pick, and I can't believe this lasted this long. I'm taking Daniel Stern's face. His face is like maybe one of my favorite actors. It's the most, I mean, obviously I have a very soft spot for Home Alone and the amazing work he did there.
Yep.
He does the same amazing things here. He has the most expressive, the most hilarious face. His face is unbelievable. Like, I don't know if it's unparalleled. I don't know, like, who else I would even put up there in thinking about who has such a emotive face. Maybe Jim Carrey was a master of his own face, but Daniel Stern is just unbelievable.
Jim Carrey is a master of his own face, but someone getting hurt, I'm not sure there's someone getting hurt with as much of a master of their own face as Daniel Stern. Maybe Chevy Chase.
Oh yeah. So I think the thing is his whole control of like the whole physical comedy with Daniel Stern is amazing. He's able to convey so much using his limbs, everything. He doesn't need to be talking to convey a lot.
No,
but the expressions that he generates are one of a kind. Yeah, and I thought those were great here as always.
Not as many physical actors like there was. I don't know. Like, are there any actors known for what he does or what like Chevy did back in the day? These like guys who get hit well or are very emotive, very expressive. I don't know. He had such.
I feel like maybe they live on YouTube now in ways that we're just not like young enough, hip enough to understand or follow. But you're right. In sort of the mainstream in movie world, it seems like it's a forgotten skill.
Yeah, a very hilarious skill. There was everyone like he had so many movies he would pump out in the 90s, early 2000s where basically he was just getting hit, and you're like, oh, fine, I'll watch. Yeah. I'll watch it. Sure, he was like a Cub Scout leader in one. He'd just get burned and eaten by mosquitoes, and then Rookie of the Year, of course, which he directed. Just goofy, so good, great pick.
My third pick, I was going to take great heckling, but we've kind of already been through that in the first half, so I'm going to leave that behind. I am going to take the ads that they did, and I know we talked about some of these in the BOLO, but the ads that they did in this movie were so well done, all around. All the like fake Nike ads, then the chainsaw ad, every single ad was like a brilliant sketch comedy bit. It was they were perfectly done. They fit in the movie really well. Like they weren't just there. It wasn't like an aside. Like they always were for a purpose that advanced something about the characters that would tell you something about it. But they were also done in a way that felt like they were real ads. I mean, that's the scene with Damon Wayans where they're flipping through channels and you're like, what's this ad? What ad is this going to be? And then it's this totally ridiculous hot dog ad. It's just every single thing was done for a purpose, and they were great. They were like really, really hilarious. Like you could tell the people had a great time coming up with those, and they put a lot of effort into it as a result.
I meant to go back and rewatch those channels that they flipped through because there was a couple funny looking ones. You know, the cook with the carrots in the ears.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was one in Daniel's as like a beer commercial, Stern dressed up in the actual commercial. But that Oscar Mayer Wiener one was phenomenal, and just there was so many just pertinent to like perfect comments for that time period where he's like, well, starting channel 2, I got 125 channels with the dish. ESPN's coming up, and we all know about the ESPN commercials in the 90s. We're like, yeah, there's gonna be an athlete in every one of these commercials.
Yep.
It's just so perfectly done. In that, like, I'll play one-on-one with you any day was the perfect commercials that were like intertwined with an animated thing where like it's such bad acting on the person on the athlete's behalf, and then there's just like tricks bunny near him or something.
So good. It was just as were a lot of things in this movie. It was better than it had to be.
Yes. Yeah, they did not need to make those perfect 15 commercials. Wow, what a pick. I'm gonna go with just 90s ESPN sports on TV. There was a time before they got all the big stuff, you know, before even hockey and baseball and all that. It was just you'd come home from school and watch log rolling, just like they had axe cutting. It'd be like strong contest, paintball. You had no archery. You didn't even know skeet shooting. It would just be on there. They didn't have all the major sports yet, so they just put on sports, and they had play-by-play and commentary for things you had no idea about the rules.
Yeah, it was great.
It was amazing. You just come in like, it was so true. Like, oh yeah, there was a period of time where like lumberjacking was one of the biggest things to watch on ESPN.
Oh yeah, I mean, there was a period of time where I like knew the best strongmen because I watched so many of those boulder lifting. Right, you're like you knew them for no reason other than you'd flip on ESPN and be like, yeah, well, I feel like I should watch this right now.
And it was so like it is now with like the Olympics. Like the Olympics are starting now as we're recording this. I don't know anything about anything. By the end of it, I'm going to know so much about all these people and like, oh, this guy's got no chance because Magnus is waiting back there. And that's how it was. You'd come from school and you'd see like these 3 guys lift that rock and put it on the square peg, and you'd be like, all right, that's not that impressive. I know who's coming up next. And you just know the game so well. Of this, and just like they were like, oh, is that going to affect the down chop from Big Jim, whatever it was? You just know, you're like, oh no, that'll affect him here, but the log rolling, that's the type of stuff you would say to your buddy as if it was nothing.
Yeah, right. You knew it. That's a great thing.
In my sleeper, which I think I burned through a few sleepers, but I'll say this was maybe it's not a Boston thing, but you know, we're from Boston, but naming your dog or pet after a Boston sports icon. I feel like for the past 25 years, there's just every other dog is a Brady. But in this one, it was like, it was so funny. They was so over the top. They used 2 names for the dog. It was Bill Russell. Like, it's not just Bill Russell. Like that. No.
That's so good.
Well, I'm naming my dog after Bill Russell.
Yep. Right. Yeah. It's not Russell or like Bill and you have to explain it or something like that. Yeah.
It's Bill Russell.
It's true. There are a lot of Bradys around right now.
Hanging on.
And I feel like Poppy was one for a while. That's great. It's a great tradition. My sleeper pick. So this is something that the 2 of them, Daniel Stern and Dan Aykroyd, do quite a bit in the stands, but there are a few things as great as just a really great high five. Like when you're just like having a great time and you nail that high five, it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's just such a great feeling. And it's totally irrelevant what else is going on or what anyone else is doing or what everyone thinks about your high five. Like when you're just in the zone, having an awesome time with your friends and you're like, it's the time for the high five and you just nail it as they do here. There's nothing better.
There isn't. And that's what's so cool about it. And this is geeking out over sports stuff, but when else are you high-fiving somebody else?
Yes.
I don't know what time.
Almost never, but in the sports context, yes.
In this sports context, you have this, and it's such a great feeling. We're like, you're having a great time. This is awesome. You're having a great time. This is awesome. Let's culminate this in celebration. Boom.
Yep. Yeah. So there's some great high fives in this film. Everyone loves a great high five. I had to go with that.
We're both double dads. I was doing some research about how bad I'm doing as a dad or whatever, the usual things that dads do. And one of the articles I read was like almost nothing as far as like positive praise with words beats a high five for a kid. So like if you're like, that was great how you drew that and you stayed within the line, you just like, no, don't say any of it, just give a high five. Boom.
Yep.
It's way more impactful because it encapsulates the entire feeling.
Everything. Oh yeah. And kids love the high five.
Of course, because of partly this feeling that it's a shared thing. Like, oh yeah, this was awesome, right? It's recognized. Yep. Great pick. I have two anti-picks, but I'm gonna go through one. I really hate having for sports fans having your mood determined by the outcome of a game toward your family. I hate that stuff. People who take a pride, like they lost today, so I got to be mad. It's like, you got to compartmentalize this stuff.
Yeah, you're doing this wrong at that point.
Yes. Keep that over here. There's like to say to my wife or my dad when he gets too big into sports, I'm like, there's a ceiling on how much you should care on this stuff.
Yeah.
Don't bring something.
Like it should really be a resource for like having a great time, not for like the negative aspects of it. Like, yeah, it sucks you can't go have an awesome time when your team wins, but so like you just go to something else.
Yes, totally. Yeah, exactly. So the Aykroyd had the 86 Buckner ball. How morbid of a treasure is that to stare at? That's like before the Sox won in 2004. That was the worst collectible you could have.
Yeah, that's like something you pay to like send into space and like no longer exists on this earth.
That is just I cannot believe he had the Buckner ball that went through his legs in his house.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. That's like a cursed object. Right.
Unless you're like flipping it being like, this is the worst thing I can ever experience. It's like Batman. I'm not afraid of this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is, I don't know. Doesn't seem like he would take that approach.
It didn't seem like that was the move there.
All right. Question for you.
Yep.
What athlete? So there was a scene in this where their idol, Larry Bird, comes up to them. They had never meet. They were in his jersey all game. I mean, all movie. Just clearly the biggest Boston sports icon. And they have to be like, we're fair weather fans, and have Larry just debase them and like hate them as people, basically, and walk away. What athlete at any point in your life, if you went up to, would you want that the least? Like you wanted them to like you so much, just like they did, that you couldn't handle them being like, you're a garbage fan. Do you have one of those?
It's probably I'm debating, and I feel like with a lot of sports, it's your connection to sports is strongest when you're a kid, right? When it's like that, sports is so important. And I feel like for me, it's either going to be Mo Vaughn or Roger Clemens.
I was going to get.
Yeah. And it's like maybe third would be Pedro. But I feel like the Mo Vaughn, Roger Clemens era, I was so into baseball. And to have one of them be disappointed at me, it's probably Clemens, because I feel like he would really let me know.
Yeah, he would
and
too.
That would just be awful. It'd be tough to take.
Yeah, Clemens is a great one. Yeah, that's a good pick. And I like how the Clemens and Vaughn are a little bit younger than the Pedro time, so that's like really hitting home.
Exactly. Yeah. Did you have one?
Mine was Neely. I was a big big Bruins fan, big hockey guy. So Neely, and it's so funny that in this movie, Aykroyd, when they pan to the first shot of Aykroyd is him watching the game in some rich guy's house, and he's supposed to be fixing the toilet. And he's like, Neely's gonna pull it out, and I'm like, oh, it shook me to my stomach core. My dad would say that. Oh, Neely will pull it out, don't worry, and he would. Next category is the superlative. So we've kind of talked about this a little bit or a lot, but good movie for it. What is your favorite cameo from this movie?
And there are so many to choose from. I mean, I think if we weren't doing this as a superlative category, this might have been a draft pick from one of us, just because there are so many cameos and there's so many fun cameos that it was one of those things. It's a fun movie. People are having a good time. It's obviously sort of a satire or comedy. There's a lot of ridiculous things going on. So it's fun to be like, oh, look, it's so-and-so and it's so-and-so. And that was just part of the fun of it. And there were so many to choose from. We had, I'm sure this isn't even a full list, but Bill Walton, Marv Albert, Larry Bird, Deion Sanders, Bob Cousy, Chris Berman, Daryl Hammond, Jeff Ross. I'm sure there are others that I'm forgetting, but that's a ton of cameos for an hour and a half movie.
Yep.
And it was tough to choose because I feel like each one of them brought a lot to the film. But for me, the number one, and we've talked about this already a little bit, it was the Larry Bird cameo. It was the importance to them and how soul-crushing it was at the time. If you take that cameo out, it's a very different film. And that's a crucial. It's rare you get a cameo that is that crucial.
It's one of the. I'm not sure there's been more. Thinking of what is that scene from The Simpsons where oh, it's a load-bearing poster or something. It's something so fragile, but it's actually holding up the whole house. That cameo was holding up the whole movie because it was so oh my, Larry's in this. He's he doesn't do anything. He was in Blue Chips for a second at his home, but he doesn't. Yeah, it was
Blue Chips, this, and Space Jam. I don't know if he did anything else.
Yeah, he just does. He's just not that guy who's in stuff. And he didn't even. It wasn't just hey, I'm Larry. He had a whole little back and forth.
He was in it,
and he was pretty good. He tore them apart. Mm-hmm. That was awesome. And it's still now. This movie is 96. It's now 30 years later. I still wager that might be for a lot of people the most important person to run into as a Boston sports fan in Boston. He doesn't live here, obviously, but if you saw Larry Bird, that would still be the biggest guy to see in Boston. Yeah,
he was huge. I mean, probably maybe Tom Brady. Maybe it took until Tom Brady came along, but until then, and that was a long time.
Yeah.
Larry Bird was the man.
Yeah, we had Ted Williams, but he never won anything, and he's dead. Doesn't help.
You can go see you go visit his cryogenically frozen head.
Mine wasn't named. I'm curious if you know him, but the cameo I have here, as I think it's a Colin Quinn buddy. And this guy, if you're from Boston, live in Boston, you know this name, the Kowloon, and all the other comedy spots. He was the landlord that Jimmy had to give the money to that showed up. That's Steve.
Yeah. What's that guy's name?
Steve Sweeney. He's it's like him. What's his name? Lenny Clark.
Lenny Clark. Yep.
Lenny Clark. It's that's their Boston scene from the 70s, 80s, 90s. That's their city. And so that guy got a plug. He was so huge in Boston. That scene was massive for him. He's even Something About Mary, I think, is the cop that comes along. He does a bunch of those New England type cameo things. So Steve Sweeney, hilarious too. But it's all Dunkin' Donuts 128 jokes because it's Boston, New England humor. But it's a great cameo if you're familiar.
Yeah, all around, just a great cameo movie. I mean, this has to be our biggest cameo movie we've ever had.
It's up there with Last Action Hero, but that was
yep. Yeah, that was a little bit. That was a little bit different, but yeah, you're right.
This one's awesome, but I can't wait for this one. Our bumper sticker. What line of dialogue would be a perfect bumper sticker from this movie?
So there were a lot to choose from here. I think on our spectrum of, I forget what movie we decided was absolutely not a bumper sticker movie, but on the other end of the spectrum was Pain and Gain, which was every other line of dialogue was a bumper sticker. This was much closer to the Pain and Gain side of things, I thought. So my choice, and I hate bumper stickers where you have to squint because there's so many words or it takes so long to read. So this is maybe a full bumper sticker, which I've never seen. Like, I'm not talking regular bumper sticker. I'm talking like this will go cover your entire bumper.
Sure, you gotta, at the red light, you inch up to read it.
Yes, and it's an aggressive bumper sticker, but this line just made me crack up, and I could see putting this on your car if you're a jerk. But it's, I'm about to snatch your asshole out and use it as a peephole. I have no idea what that means, and I know exactly what that means.
Right.
You know, like it conveys a feeling that you 100% get, even though I have no clue what is intended to be said by those actual words.
It means nothing, like you said, but it means everything. The words mean nothing, but the feeling means everything. You know what they mean. They're not happy. That's a great one. Wow, I didn't even have that written. That's a great one. I have a couple here. I'm gonna go. Maybe we'll do some honorable mentions after, but this is very Boston based, or I bet like other cities in the Northeast are like this, where it matters so much where you're from. Out here in California, I'm in Southern California, it feels like everything's so, no one knows where anyone's from. Everyone's just like, whatever. But like Boston, is like, what, not only are you from Dorchester, what part of Dorchester and what street of Dorchester do you live on? That, like that.
Yes.
My buddy who was from, my college roommate grew up in Southie. And so then like, there's like New Southie, this South. It's such like this weird thing of like being, where exactly are you from? Because then I know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So mine is simply because it's a line from this after the Larry Bird line. It's Mike and Jimmy. They're in the Roxy, and they defended Lewis or whatever Damon Wayans. They defended him in the club, and the guy, he goes, "Where are you from?" And that's that's what I want. Like, just
Yep.
Where are you from? Because that's all that matters. I don't get what's going on. Like, it's people going like, I don't get what's going on with you right now, but are you from here or not? If you are, it's fine. If not, then screw off. But just the
right. Yeah, it's the like hyper territoriality or something like that. It's just it's very, you're 100% right that it's very much where you're from to a very specific degree.
Yeah, I just keep thinking of my buddy, my roommate in college, and he's just like, everybody in college. We went to college in New Hampshire. He's from Southie. He's like, where are you from? Like Boston. He's like, oh God, what part? Brighton. oh, Boston. Okay, what part of Brighton? And just like water you down until you're from nowhere. Yeah. That's really tough over there.
Did you have any honorable mentions there?
So, yeah, I did. It's too specific to be a bumper sticker, but I hear Manute Bol is banging your mom. So just in just having that on the back of your car. And now Manute Bol's son is in the NBA, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
And I
liked I do have the berries.
Yeah, that's good. Would "do" be capitalized and just to emphasis?
Oh, it would have to be. Yeah.
I like "your dreams are my realities" when he's talking about like having sex with like the Calvin Klein model.
Yep. I also had the flip side. My dream is dead.
My dream. That's phenomenal. You have to put that on.
You don't want to mess with the person who has that bumper sticker on their car.
That might be the most terrifying bumper sticker, because there's one thing you don't want to mess with, and it's someone with nothing to lose, and there's no one.
Yes, exactly.
To lose, and their dream is dead.
Yep.
That's great. Terrifying. One change to be a blockbuster. This happens in like 90s movies where they can't. It's changed now because I think basketball is synonymous with like hip hop and just relevant current culture. But in the 90s, it was still like boo 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 boo. It was like this weird globetrottery, jazzy, white, goofy music. And so I would just change the music when basketball is being played. That's it. It's really goofy music that's on when basketball happens. Yeah. So I would just change that.
I like that. I think that, I think that's the tone. So like the subtle shift in the tone could make a big difference.
I keep bringing up, but like Blue Chips, the music in Blue Chips makes the basketball scenes. It's so good.
Yes.
But this
the basketball scenes in Blue Chips are also amazing.
Right. Well, yeah, they're also amazing. That probably helps it too.
I guess they're actual athletes, right? I mean,
Right.
that helps. Mine, and this you could do just with yours. It's just, I think they released it at the wrong time. This came out at the beginning of the NBA playoffs in 1996. Your target audience, I'm assuming, is NBA fans. In the beginning of the NBA playoffs, there are so many games to watch. There's no time to go to the movies.
No.
Like, no real NBA fan is going to the movies then. You got to do this at the beginning of the season, when early NBA season, games don't really matter so much, but you're still amped for the season and for basketball to be back. Or maybe right after the NBA finals, where you just had that and then there's a lull before you're shifting into baseball or something else. But right when the playoffs are starting, that's just all wrong.
Yeah, they're busy watching basketball.
Yeah. And then this is probably the time to discuss this. I mean, I think part of the like kind of fatal flaw, and it's not just for this movie, but it's for attempting a movie like this, is this is a satire, right? Like you're satirizing hardcore crazy fans and all the superstitions and the lengths that they'll go to be a part of, to support their team, all that.
I think in Boston.
Yes, and specifically Boston for sure. And the tough part there is that it's also a sports movie, so your audience is probably sports fans, but people don't always like having themselves, get their peculiarities and their strangeness thrown in their face like this. So you're in kind of a tough spot where you might be alienating your very fan base, which I think is the if you're trying to make a lot of money on this, is probably the fatal flaw for a movie like this. It's just really tough to satirize your audience.
That's a really incredible point. Like, yeah, who's watching this movie? Basketball fans. Who are they making fun of? Basketball fans. Like, yeah,
exactly.
It's not the easiest take to go watch yourself be made fun of for an hour and a half.
Yeah, and there are obviously people, I mean, we thought it was great. There's a lot of people who are into that, but there's a whole lot of people who just aren't. That's not what they're up for. And you're going to run into that. And I think that's what happened here. And there's kind of no way around that, because that's the whole purpose of the film.
You kind of have to be a little level-headed to enjoy this movie, to not think like, no, you root for your team. You do what you do. Like, there are people that's how they view being a fan. There's no other, it's like being in politics. There's one side or the other. There's no joking about it. This is the team. That's a great point. I forgot about this one. I just thought of it, but I wonder if the movie, and I'm sure there's a reason for this. I don't know what it was. I didn't look it up, but if it wasn't Utah and it was the Lakers, that might just be enough to be like, because he even says, like Damon Wayans even says, he's like, I wish our fans were as passionate as you guys, because it's like you have one passionate base and then you pick just like some blahs like Utah, whatever. Like, it's not a big, it exists within the NBA and they are NBA fans, but it's not like one of these hotbeds of fandom, Utah. Right. So like, what if it was Boston and LA? That would probably bring in two huge markets and the rest of the entire country who actually cares about Boston playing LA, not Boston playing Utah. And they could have said wear yellow and purple, not just wear purple.
Right.
Nice. Spinoff idea. Do you have a good one? Are you proud of yours, or should I go first?
Mine's all right. I wouldn't say it's fun. I wouldn't say it's my best work.
All right, go ahead then. Go ahead.
Mine, I've really enjoyed the cop. Paul Guilfoyle, who plays the cop, he's a Boston guy. He has the accent. He has the persona, the vibe. He nails that just right. I liked his sort of casual and playful crookedness, where he sort of lets things slide. He's trying to profit off this inside information on this kidnapping. I want to see the sort of his backstory told in another sort of comedy like this. I feel like there aren't that many, if any, crooked cop comedies. I feel like a lot of the cop comedies are good cop comedies. I want a bad cop comedy, but not bad in like a murdering people, just bad in like a casually crooked kind of way.
Bad in like Super Troopers. You don't want to.
Yeah.
You don't want to. You do meow and not like aggressive stuff.
Right. So I thought, give me his backstory, and I mean, ideally, I would have liked to have it come out in the same time so we could still have that same actor who I thought was perfect for it. But I'm sure you can find another actually from Boston guy to reprise this role.
I did like the little twist there too, that he thought he was gambling on everything.
Yeah.
But it was on T-shirts, which it's funny because it became such a big T-shirts were. You look at footage of basketball events or other sporting events, especially basketball, prior to like the early 90s, and everyone's in like suits and no one's in gear representing the team or anything going on about the team, but like making shirts about what happened seemed like this crazy idea at the time, because you thought like, doesn't Starter have to do that? Doesn't a big brand have to do that? A regular person could just make T-shirts, and like that's everywhere now. But at the time, it was like this crazy idea to hatch a scheme to be like, I know, I'll make 20,000 T-shirts.
Yeah, right. It's that kind of enterprising nature that I feel like would be fantastic to get a deeper dive.
Yeah, that guy was, and I loved how just he was always around. I feel like I think he already knew what was happening if we went into his movie. That's why he was always around. So I was just there. That's a good one. I couldn't tell if I'm not going to go with it, but like we obviously could have had like a sequel where they didn't learn the lesson. All of a sudden, it's a Pats movie, right? Patriots movie, and not a Celtics movie. But I didn't do that one. I want the one where Mike and Jimmy both realize they have a problem, and they go, "I'm done with sports," and they move the farthest place possible to them, which is within the United States, to the West Coast. They end up in LA, and they just forget about sports and living their life. They have kids, they have families, and it turns out that both their kids, turn out to be Lakers fans. And so championship coming up where Boston is playing, and we still have Aykroyd, we still have Stern, they're both alive, I believe, and we have whatever young people playing their sons to be their kids, and we have the Celtics playing the Lakers in current day, and their fandom comes back. They can't let it happen, and they end up doing things to prevent the Lakers from winning. Their kids do things to prevent the Celtics from winning. They realize their love of sports, and then come together for one hokey nonsense to be like, you know what actually matters is watching sports together. But whatever, that's the end. But really what it is they go dormant to try and forget about their passion of sports, and it gets pulled back out of them because their kids, and this has happened to one of our friends out here, who's happening because his son is a Yankees fan. It happens when you move, where your kids can be fans of the local place or anywhere else. So I would say just a turn. Have their kids be Lakers fans.
And I feel like that's like right in line with how they're doing these sequels and reboots now, where it's sort of the same movie, but they're using it as a bridge to pull in some younger actors.
Right.
I think that I'm surprised that's not in some form of production right now. Are you concerned as a Boston fan living in California that this is your future?
Don't even see it as a possibility. So that's why I haven't grappled with it. I mean, my son and I are watching Celtics Summer League games out here. We're not watching. So I feel like I can do enough to get him on the Celtics side, but I don't know. Once he starts going to school, I'm lost. He's wearing purple and gold.
Yeah, you just got to hope the Lakers are not good in his like formative years. Because if they're good when he's in like elementary school, you're screwed.
Yeah, I got no chance. You're right. And they will be good because they're the Lakers. They're just going to get
They're always good.
Whatever best free agent there is.
Yeah. Yeah, you're in trouble. Well, you can always kidnap the star player.
Always a move. We want to get.
Was there anything we missed? Any notes? The only note I had was that Gail O'Grady, who's the wife here of Daniel Stern in the film, married and divorced 6 times. So I don't know if that was how she got the role here, but clearly acting from experience.
Lots of saved documents in her past. Other notes. I thought the gym teacher, I thought Daniel Stern did a bad job decorating the gym, which is pretty, which coincides, I think, with how good he was as a phys ed teacher. Those walls are there. There's usually a couple posters up there. I thought the Bruins game when we first saw Dan Aykroyd's character, he was in that rich house with daylight out. So I know it wasn't a weekday game. It had to be a weekend game, which means it's Saturday or Sunday, which means he's a plumber. He's getting at least time and a half double time, which makes sense that he's in a rich house. But I understand why that guy was upset because he is paying him.
Yeah, you're playing double time on a Sunday. You wanted to get fixed. And we talked about this before, but again, another instance of a detail, that they didn't need to go into that level of exquisite detail here, and they did. This movie didn't need to be as thoughtful and as good as it was, and they went there.
This movie's like meat. It's like a lot of details in the wrong place that no one cares about. A lot of thought for things that do not matter and no one cares about.
Yep.
Also, one of the notes, the Celtic squad was basically an all-white team that was in the finals. That was a pretty funny thing. I'm sure this movie's about like Boston, all these Irish guys, white teams. Maybe they look, maybe the team looks just like the people. So it was just this NBA team in '96 of basically all white dudes in the finals. I thought that was a pretty fun casting decision. And the idea that Larry Bird just hangs out at clubs. I'm pretty sure Larry Bird is a private guy who hurt his back on his own driveway, not dancing in clubs. So it's very funny that he would be at the Roxy in Fenway. Was that in Fenway? That was the one from Boston.
I don't know where that was.
I think I'm confusing it with Empire or one of the garbage.
All right. Well, what do we got lined up next?
Next up, do we have a JCVD John Claude movie?
That's right. Well, we have two. We have two JCVD movies in one. Yes. Next up, I think both of us were blown away that this qualifies. It's not even in our list because we didn't think to look it up because it is such a fantastic film. Double Impact. Can't wait.
Yeah, this is awesome. We love JCVD movies, and now we have a JCVD movie with two of them in the same movie.
Yeah, unbelievable.
This was a blast. I thought super, super fun to do this as a Celtics fan and having them just won the championship.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a lot of fun, and talk to you next episode.
Later.